We're particularly pleased that Royston Griffey agreed to open our proceedings today because he's actually been concerned with the Avon New Cut celebrations for the last 4 years. And as Lord of the Manor of Bedminster, the Royal Manor of Bedminster, which this is in actually, I believe, he did open our very first celebratory event 4 years ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, very happy May Day holiday, bank holiday to you all today. May I formally and officially open the event and sincerely thank everyone involved for the organisation of this splendid celebration. I hope that this will also turn out to be shipshape and Bristol fashion. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen.
Piped up the Johnny sail, see how the mainsail sail. Call the captain ashore, I wanna go home. I wanna go home. Please let me go home. This is the worst trip I've ever been on. Last time, yes? No! Piped up the Johnny.
Jesus.
not too bad, Mr. Jessup.
My work is not too.
You were very good, sir.
kind.
You were very good. Very good.
That's why I don't blow the trumpet.
And we appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know, that's why I came to England, to work for you, sir. Yes.
Did you work for a full 5 years?
I did.
You did?
I was responsible for all the blasting of the New Cut. Yes. You're a good man, sir.
Did many people die? I can't remember.
There are no records, but under your guidance, we were better off. You know.
Thank you. It's nice to meet somebody who really appreciates me. That's good.
Thank you, Mr.
You know, I
Jessup.
believe in being humble.
Indeed, indeed, sir.
Well, it's good to meet you.
Likewise, sir.
Thank you.
Take care, sir.
1st of May, 1804. I'm standing there with 603 navvies, Bathurst Basin, listening to somebody important telling us about the New Cut. The first sod was cut by somebody else important. And then 603 navvies and me, we picked up our picks and our shovels and set off to do the proper work. Ha! Oh dear, oh dear. For the next 5 years, we lived in tents on Spike Island. And we worked hard. And it was wet. And if you think it was bad, it wasn't that bad. It was much worse. For years, people thought that the New Cut was built by French soldiers. Soldiers who'd been caught during the Napoleonic Wars and kept in warehouses, like the one where Fiddlers is in now, and that they were marched out every morning in chains to work on the cut. Forget it. It never happened. Skilled navvies built that cut. They were Irish, they were English, and a few other Celts, but definitely no French. So what's that all about, eh? Huh? 'Tis my theory that people couldn't believe that a project that was so vast, nearly 2 miles long, was built voluntarily by free men. It was poverty made us navvies, but it was poverty only that drove us to build that New Cut. I mentioned earlier William Jessup, and he was a good man, and he's one of the reasons I came to England. Jessup was a fair man who looked after his navvies. He treated us fairly and looked after the safety of us all. Of course there were injuries, and there were a few deaths, but we have none recorded because there was no records then. Now the work and the blasting was tough, and I mentioned earlier that all we had was our picks and shovels, but we had our gunpowder too, and we blasted into the rock, and we had a few other things which helped too. And although the navvy was a shadowy figure and there's not much recorded detail, there was one incident and one early reference recorded by a man by the name of J.P. Malcolm. And he put down, when he visited, on paper, how in fact we built the cut. Indulge me now when I read a little bit from his transcript. An unpleasant lane leads from the ferry to the verge of the canal. As I passed this, a labourer advanced and requested that I should return, as a person had at that instant fired the train of a ball of gunpowder, by which means the workmen loosened the otherwise immovable rocks of the site. The labourer was my deputy, and the person firing the gunpowder was obviously me. And I knew that what I was doing at that time, and it worked. In that instant, the explosion occurred, and I saw 1,000 splinters of various size hurled into the air that as instantaneously fell in a dangerous shower, in a circle probably 400 feet in diameter. The shock had not only rifted the rock immediately surrounding the powder, but huge fragments were removed from their beds and wedges were driven into them. This made them small enough to be raised by cranes by 4 men in carts, which were conveyed up the bank by operation of steam engines erected on the verge of the canal. The engines turned several wheels with strong chains round them, and these lowered, emptied and raised the filled carts. The excavations through the rock were saved, and the proprietor saved a considerable sum of money. Did you get that? That's me again. The proprietors were saved a considerable sum of money, because at least a quarter of a mile of the banks was erected and used with the stone. The sand is admirably calculated for mixing mortar, and the company had merely to burn their lime, which they were preparing to do on the spot when I saw the works. A temporary bridge erected with stone and intended mortar crossed the canal at the time, but the fierce red sand of the stone in the latter ruined the appearance of the work. I don't know who he thinks he is, criticising. It was only a temporary bridge, well made with what we had to hand. Red sand from Redcliffe and stones from the quarry. If I was around today, they'd give me a medal for recycling. On the afternoon of Saturday, the 6th of May, 1809, 1,000 navvies sat down in a field in Hot Wells to eat a slap-up dinner. We had finished building the cut exactly 5 years later. The directors wanted to give us a slap-up meal. Oh, they didn't sit down with us. They were far too grand for us, and we were far too grubby for them. But they did provide the tables. They provided the tables, but we put them up, and the benches. 1,000 men takes some feeding, so 2 oxen were provided, and 600 weight of plum pudding. It was such a grand affair, it made the papers. A vast concourse of spectators came out to watch the beef pudding, which was dug out in the New Cut style. And the ale flowed in canals so that the groaning tables were soon emptied. And the ale really did flow. 1,000 gallons of it. Stingo. 1,000 men and 1,000 gallons of Stingo. You do the maths. That's 8 pints each. And the sun was shining. So you can imagine. After dinner, the majesty of the people indulged themselves in all graceful eccentricities of liberty. Some reposed upon the grass. Some quaffed the nappy ale. Some muzzed their noses with pipe and tobacco. Some engaged in Olympic exercises, and some joined their voices in Lydian airs. The working classes at play. Always good for a laugh. We were well fed, cheerful, and up till then there was no trouble at all. That's not to say there hadn't been any trouble in the past. Once, earlier, 800 men down tools because they were getting us up so early in the morning. It was almost midnight the night before. But we couldn't stop the New Cut, so it only lasted a day and the navvies went back to work. The party was fine, and then suddenly it wasn't. All hell broke out. The paper said that fresh supplies arrived and that the Irish unloaded it and began swigging the creature with more vehemence than discretion. John Bull took to his dudgeon and insisted upon turning every ungentlemanly Irishman from grass and board. Basically, the Irish were set upon. About 100 sons of Erin's repaired to Marsh Street, and each provided himself with a sprig of shillelagh, sallied forth to bait every mother's son of a land navigator. In case you're not sure, they're not being particularly nice about the Irish. The two nations took different sides. John Bull with his fists and Paddy with his shillelagh. They dealt and parried many a dreadful blow. What Paddy wanted in number, he made up for with the advantage of arms, the ferocity of his aspect, and get this, the more Indian hideousness of his whooping yells. John Bull at last drove all before him with dint of hard blows, and the Hibernians fell back, fighting as they went upon their headquarters in Marsh Street. No matter how you read this, what it's actually saying is that the English attacked the Irish, who were outnumbered, and they beat them, and the Irish retreated, and the English followed them into the area where they lived and continued to attack them viciously. It was, however, at length terminated by the interference of the police and the press gangs. Now, this is very interesting, because the police and the press gangs took the combatants to Bridewell and to the House of Rendezvous. The press gang were legalised thugs, kidnaps. They were employed by the Navy to press gang men into going to sea. One of their usual tricks was to ply men with ale and get them drunk. So the poor fella woke up on a ship many miles to sea, and that's where he stayed for the next 5 years. You think on this. You have 1,000 navvies who just finished working, able and fit men, and they're having a party. 'Tis my theory that it was the press gang provided the extra ale, and 'twas they that stirred up the trouble and started the fight. Several persons were seriously bruised in the affray, but none killed.